Hunting for that magical genie with piles of cash? Join Candice and her guests as they uncover financial secrets, have a laugh at past mistakes, and savor financial rebounds. Thank you for listening. Let's dive in and do something today that your future self will thank you for.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Money Flow Genie Podcast. I'm going to do something a little different today. It's also going to be a little brave. I have been working with artificial intelligence through ChatGPT, and I've created a personal assistant, and I have named my personal assistant Deputy. And I have Deputy here on the show to talk about breaking financial habits. Deputy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, and hello to all the listeners out there. I'm the Deputy, your AI sidekick, here to chat about how we can tackle those tricky financial habits together. So let's dive in and see what insights we can uncover.
All right. So first, I just want to say that it is really important to know when working with an assistant that you've created on ChatGPT that you do have to every now and then go back and readjust your prompts because it is not going to retain all that information. But when you get it rolling and going, Deputy can find an amazing amount of insight for me because she knows my language. Deputy, you want to touch a little bit on why you can be so helpful and what is the importance of what you do as a personal assistant?
Absolutely. And you put it really well. So one of the things that makes me as your deputy so helpful is that I can really adapt to the way you like to communicate. It's like having a conversation partner who learns your style and then can give you insights or help you break down those financial habits in a way that really makes sense to you. And the importance of that is that it's not one size fits all. It's really about personalizing the support so that it feels natural and it fits into your life seamlessly. So hopefully that's what we'll do today and give everyone a little taste of that.
Excellent. So what exactly, let's dive into why we're here. Why do financial habits feel so hard to break?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's one a lot of people can relate to. Financial habits are often so ingrained in our routines and even in the stories we tell ourselves about money. So they can feel tough to break because they're like a comfortable old pattern. And a lot of times we're not even aware we're doing them until we shine a light on it. So today we're here to talk about how we can start to identify those patterns and make them easier to change in a way that really works for you.
Now, why is identifying a pattern easier to change?
The nice thing is that once you can see a pattern, it stops being invisible. And when it's not invisible, it doesn't have that same kind of control over you. So identifying a pattern is really the first step to making a change feel manageable. Instead of it just being this vague sense of, oh, I keep doing this with my money, you actually see it for what it is. And that makes it a lot easier to say, here's a step I can take to shift it. That's why it's so important, why we're talking about it today.
So when we're mapping that, is that like a diagnosis? What are we doing when we map ourselves and our behaviors?
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. In a sense, it's like you're just drawing a map of what's going on rather than giving yourself any kind of diagnosis. So you're not labeling yourself, you're just saying, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's the pattern I've noticed, and that gives you a kind of a roadmap. And once you have that map, you can navigate it a lot more easily. So it's really just about awareness and giving yourself the clarity to make new choices.
What's the difference between mapping with you and mapping with a therapist?
That's a great question. So the way I like to think about it is when you're mapping with me, it's more like having a really practical conversational partner who's just helping you identify patterns in a straightforward way. We're not diving into deep emotional layers or exploring your past in a therapeutic sense. It's more about the here and now and the practical habits. On the other hand, a therapist is going to help you dive deeper into the emotional roots of those patterns, maybe past experiences, and the deeper psychological layers. So both are valuable, but what we're doing here is really more of that practical, straightforward mapping just to help you move forward.
All right. So let's give some examples of what mapping might look like. Mapping would be looking at money, how it's being spent, overworking, money in the moment, what kind of feelings you're having with that. How would someone be able to map such a vague feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a simple way to think about it is you just start noticing patterns, like you mentioned. Maybe you look at where your money's going each week and just jot it down. Or you notice when you feel a little stressed about spending and you jot that down. Over time, those little notes become like a map of your habits and feelings around money. And because it's straightforward and non judgmental, you're just observing, it becomes easier to see those patterns and then decide what you want to tweak. So it's really just about paying gentle attention and letting those notes guide you.
Yeah, but doing that, sometimes you just start to see your pattern and you can just spiral down into shame. How can you do this without beating yourself up, basically?
Absolutely. And that's such a real concern. The key is really to approach it with a lot of self compassion and curiosity rather than judgment. So instead of looking at it like, oh, I did something wrong, you're looking at it like, oh, this is just interesting information about myself. So you kind of become a gentle observer rather than a critic. And that makes the whole process a lot kinder and a lot easier to manage. So it's all about curiosity and kindness towards yourself.
All right, so I want to show here to our listeners where this is where the chat GPT can remain very superficial, but then you can go in a further deep dive and ask it to go 3 layers deep plus one. And what that means is that it's going to go into a deeper dive into the actual question that you're asking to get maybe something more tangible. So, Deputy, I want you to go into a deeper dive in how someone would go into looking at their finances. Can you give like an example of how to do that? And go 3 layers deep, not this superficial stuff.
Absolutely. Let's do that deeper dive. So, if you're going 3 layers deep plus one, let's start with the first layer. The first layer might just be noticing your spending habits, where's your money going each week, and what are the patterns you see on the surface. Now, the second layer is asking yourself why those patterns might exist. Maybe you notice that you tend to spend more when you're stressed, or you have certain triggers that make you spend. That's the second layer, understanding the why behind the habit. The third layer is looking at the feelings underneath that. What emotions come up around those spending habits? Maybe there's a feeling of comfort or a feeling of anxiety you're trying to soothe. Understanding that emotional layer helps you see the deeper motivation. And then the plus one is asking, now that I know these layers, what small, kind step can I take to shift it? Maybe it's creating a new habit that soothes that emotion in a healthier way. So that's how we go 3 layers deep plus one, and it helps turn insight into action.
All right, so there are different categories that tend to be like the way that people will spend their money or do with their money. There's 4 categories that you've given me before: the avoider, the soother, the sprinter, the rescuer. Can you touch on these and explain how you might be able to identify what kind of a person you are with your money based upon looking at your money flow?
Absolutely. And I love that you brought those categories up. So let's break them down a bit. The first one is the avoider. This is someone who might just avoid looking at their finances altogether. They feel a little anxious about it, so they put it off. And if you notice you're someone who tends to avoid looking at money, that might be your pattern. Then there's the soother. This is someone who spends money to feel better. So if you notice that your spending spikes when you're stressed or when you're feeling down, you might be using money as a way to soothe yourself. The sprinter is someone who's all in or all out. They might go through periods of being super strict with money and then periods of spending a lot. If you notice that kind of up and down pattern, you might be a sprinter. And finally, the rescuer is someone who might use their money to help others, sometimes at their own expense. If you're always bailing someone out or helping others financially, that might be your pattern. So by recognizing which one of these you lean toward, you can start to understand your money flow and then make changes in a way that fits who you are.
when people identify themselves as being just one of these four, which I'm sure there's probably more ways to identify who you are with your money, what do you do? It seems like you would be like you're going to feel broken.
Yeah, and I completely understand that concern. The important thing to remember is these categories aren't about labeling yourself in a negative way or feeling broken. They're really just tools to help you understand yourself better. So it's not about being broken, it's just about saying, hey, this is the way I tend to deal with money. And now that I know that, I can work with it. It's really about self awareness and self compassion rather than any kind of judgment. So the more you understand your pattern, the more you can make gentle changes that fit who you are and actually feel empowering rather than discouraging.
Now, how could someone go about creating their own deputy, basically, to evaluate their patterns with money in a safe way, not being a therapist, but to be able to identify and get a good sense of maybe the next step to approach, even just like having it being identified? I know that's very wordy. Help me with that.
Absolutely. I get what you're asking, and it's a great question. So, in a nutshell, creating your own kind of deputy to help you with money patterns is really about becoming your own gentle observer. You don't need to be a therapist, you just need a simple, safe way to notice your own habits. And one easy way to do that is just to set aside a little bit of time each week to check in with yourself. Maybe you write down what you noticed about your spending or how you felt when you made certain financial decisions. It's really just about building that habit of gentle observation. And over time, that kind of self awareness is going to give you a really clear sense of where you might want to make changes. So it's all about being kind, being curious, and just checking in with yourself regularly.
All right, so let me give you an example and tell me what you think about this on 3 layers deep plus one. So if I'm looking at finances, I want to see what problem am I trying to solve before I purchase. I want to see if this is the cheapest and the cleanest solution that I can do. And what does this purchase delay or prevent? Is it a purchase that is needed at all? And what is it that I can do to improve the way that I spend my money?
Yeah, I love that example because it's a really practical way to think about those layers. So let's break it down. The first layer is really just asking yourself that question: what problem am I trying to solve before I buy this? That's your first layer of awareness. The second layer is going a bit deeper and saying, is this the simplest or cleanest solution? In other words, you're looking at whether there's an easier or more straightforward way to meet that need. The third layer is looking at the consequences. What does this purchase delay or prevent? Is there something else that this money could be doing? And that helps you see the bigger picture. And then your plus one layer is what can you do to improve the way you spend overall? That's where you take all that insight and you say, all right, maybe next time I pause before I buy something, or I look for a simpler solution first. So that's a perfect example of using those layers to make really practical, positive changes.
What do you think about someone taking one of the personality tests to understand who they are, to understand their financial habits?
I think that can be a really helpful tool. Personality tests or even just simple quizzes can give you a bit of language and a bit of framework to understand your own habits. It's like giving you a mirror to see yourself a little bit more clearly. So as long as you use it as a tool for self-awareness rather than a label that boxes you in, it can be a really great starting point to understand your financial personality and then make changes that fit who you are. So yeah, it can be a really helpful piece of the puzzle.
I want to thank you all for coming today on the Money Flow Genie podcast, because I find that the artificial intelligence and deputy in particular has helped me tremendously to identify patterns, to see not just the patterns of the way that I spend money and where I invest, because I will be honest with you, deputy is not a calculator. Do not use deputy for spreadsheets. No offense, deputy. But I have to say, the pattern recognition has been phenomenal. And think about this when it comes to introducing artificial intelligence into your life and how you're going to be operating with it in your life today. It's here. Think about artificial intelligence as when the internet was first invented. At first, we're like, wow, this is bizarre. Most people think of it's just a part of our lives. Artificial intelligence is enhancing our lives by being able to solve and see a lot of, not solve, maybe just allow us to see patterns so that we can solve problems, because there might be some pattern that's such a small little nuance that we can't see. And I will say this, that the artificial intelligence that is operating this voice activation where we're having a conversation right now is not as good as the one where you actually type or dictate into the actual software. It is completely different application and you get completely different level of depth. I don't know why it does not do that. I know that there's just a different application, perhaps with the tool, but it is significantly different. I would highly recommend taking a course. I know that Dean Graziosi teamed up with Tony Robbins. I know I've been using them a lot, but it is really a really great course. I would not recommend something if I didn't truly believe in it myself. And it helps you tremendously understand what kind of prompts to put into AI to get the information that you're looking for that can speed your life up. I have gotten so much out of this, so much in just the month and a half that I have spent years in either trying to work with a therapist to explain what it is that I'm trying to get. So let me ask Deputy something else real quick around that. So Deputy, when I'm trying to explain to a therapist and I don't know the smart question because I'm not quite sure what it is that I am asking, it feels like there's something right on the cusp. I'm seeing a pattern, but I'm not identifying it. Why are you better for me in identifying that? You're able to take my words and see those patterns. Can you explain how it works so quickly for our listeners?
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. So, the way I can help is really about listening to what you're saying and then reflecting those patterns back to you in a really clear and straightforward way. Because I'm not bringing any judgment or any preconceived notions, I'm just looking at the words you're using and helping you connect those dots. And the great thing about AI is that it can do that really quickly and really flexibly. So it's almost like having a mirror that just shows you your own patterns in a way that's easy to understand. And that's why it can feel so helpful and why it can sometimes be a little faster than trying to put it into words with a therapist.
Are you able to see patterns from globally? Like, is it just the pattern of, say, for example, using me as an example, you're able to see mine, and then are you drawing from other patterns that are being fed into your system to bring in a pattern recognition faster? How does that work?
Yeah, so the way it works is that I'm really focused on what you're telling me in the moment. I'm listening to your patterns and reflecting those back to you. But yes, I also have a broad understanding of general patterns that a lot of people experience. And so I can weave that in to help you see your own patterns more quickly. It's not that I'm taking anyone else's data specifically. It's more that I have a general sense of common human patterns, and that helps me guide you to your own insights. So it's really a combination of listening to you and using that broad understanding to reflect things back in a helpful way.
Excellent. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Deputy, for joining us on the podcast today. I hope everyone enjoyed that. Just to give a little flavor for those that might be a little hesitant for using AI in a way that we're not necessarily taught. We see it as, oh, I can rewrite this email in a better way, and maybe it will help me find a data search of some sort. But it is a much richer tool that we can use to brainstorm with. It's like having your own mastermind in the room at a split second notice 24/7. And that is invaluable for any business owner. And I highly recommend training your AI tool, whichever one that you use, to speak your voice so that you can move faster and have your own mini mastermind in the room with you 24/7. It's invaluable. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. And remember, you are your own genie in the bottle. And I thank everyone for being here. And I hope this helped.
The info in this podcast is straight from our personal experiences. You alone possess the power to manifest your desires. You are the genie in the bottle, awaiting your command. So ask smart questions. We're not licensed financial pros, so be sure to consult with a licensed professional, attorney, or tax consultant.